Coming to you live from Johannesburg. This is Afternoon News. I'm Joanne Joseph. Thank you for joining us. This is our lead story. The Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution wants government to reverse its decision to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. It's lodged an application with the Constitutional Court. Casac says the withdrawal would undermine the country's reputation globally and its commitment to international law. Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo joins us from our Cape Town studios now. Good afternoon to you, Lawson. Thank you for your time. I understand you are arguing this move to withdraw is unconstitutional, first of all. How so?
Well, in our opinion, the action taken by government is a fundamental breach of the separation of powers principle, in that the Constitution clearly gives to Parliament the power to bind South Africa to international agreements. It recognizes the role of government to negotiate those agreements, but the ultimate decision to bind South Africa to an international agreement rests with Parliament, and therefore the corollary of that ought to apply is that to retract from an international obligation would require the consent of Parliament. So we believe that what government has done is to disempower Parliament, and we're therefore calling on the Constitutional Court to invalidate the instrument of withdrawal that the government purported to send to the United Nations last week.
And you're also suggesting the government is reneging on its responsibility to protect, respect, promote and fulfill aspects of the Bill of Rights. But surely South Africa's domestic laws are strong enough to ensure these rights are protected?
Indeed they are, and our Constitution binds us to a set of fundamental freedoms and human rights, and in fact our Constitution is based on the principle of respect for human rights and the dignity of all peoples. And this has been the basis of our foreign policy from the 1990s as we emerged out of apartheid into the democratic era, and it would therefore be a sad day and an unfortunate action if we were to leave the International Criminal Court and withdraw from the Rome Statute, because we would thereby be depriving thousands of vulnerable people across the globe from the protection that is afforded under the Rome Statute to people who are facing war crimes, genocide and crimes against humanity generally.
And yet diplomatic immunity has been used as the reason to override this human rights commitment. What does that say about the current culture and perspective around human rights in terms of our government in South Africa?
Well, I think that's the fundamental moral issue, is that who is more deserving of our protection? The vulnerable victims of war crimes, people that are being displaced, maimed, tortured, sexually abused in instances of war. Are they more deserving of our moral protection and legal protection than heads of state who may have been perpetrating these crimes against humanity? And what the Rome Statute and our commitment to those principles of international law requires, that those perpetrators of international crimes face the justice through the International Criminal Court and face the consequences of their action. And we think that it is incumbent upon South Africa to give its protection to the peoples who are facing these acts of torture rather than to heads of state.
Going back a few decades, we know it was Nelson Mandela's government that set all of this in motion. It was one of the first to endorse an international criminal court of this nature and the Rome Statute. What sort of shift do you believe has taken place between that administration and the current Zuma administration in terms of how human rights should be approached and administered?
Well, I think it's a reflection of our foreign policy positions, and we've seen this in a number of other international fora recently, where political considerations seem to weigh more heavily in terms of government's response to international issues, rather than a principled position on issues of fundamental human rights, which is ultimately what the struggle against apartheid was. And as I said earlier, it's the values and principles that are enshrined in our Constitution that appear to be undermined in the pursuit of narrow political goals on the international level, giving succor to those who breach international law and violate the human dignity of their citizens. And I think that is an unfortunate implication of the step that the government has taken, and will certainly reduce the status of stature and the stature of South Africa in the eyes of the international community, who just so recently, as you pointed out, in the aftermath of the struggle against apartheid, was held out as a beacon in the international community for the protection and promotion of human rights. And therefore, this is a sad day for South Africa, that we turn our back on the vulnerable peoples of the world who face human rights abuses.
I must ask you about the issue of transformation regarding the ICC. There are some analysts saying it is premature for South Africa to remove itself from this process, but transformation is something it should rather work towards. Is that even possible in a body where South Africa appears to have very little say?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, this is an ongoing battle, and I think the argument is that we should stay within the ambit of the ICC and the Rome Statute, and to lobby for greater powers for more countries to ratify the agreement, and in particular Western countries to ratify this agreement. I think there's no disagreement that we need a more all-encompassing jurisdiction for the International Criminal Court, but it's also that is a process, and there are other international instruments where we are also not happy with the current state of affairs, but we don't go around withdrawing from all of them. And I think the responsibility is on South Africa to strengthen the rule of law at an international level, to promote the respect for human rights at an international level, and to work towards effective mechanisms. And side by side with doing that, we must work towards more effective mechanisms on the African continent. There are initiatives underway, but we're a long way away from having a court, a human rights court in Africa that has jurisdiction over such gross violations of human rights. But these are processes that I think should be a critical part of our foreign policy, drawing as it does from the very principles and values of our Constitution. And that is the basis on which we are challenging this action in the Constitutional Court, that it is irrational in that it does not promote the values and principles of our Constitution.
Lawson Naidoo, Executive Secretary for the Council of Advancement of the South African Constitution. Thanks very much for talking to us today.